Alicia, we're making some changes to the Quantum Drive launch team, Richard Calloway said, his voice carrying that casual cruelty I'd witnessed him use on others. We've decided to go with Samantha instead. She brings more energy than you. Energy. The word hit me like a physical blow. I'd spent 6 months crafting the rollout strategy for Zeus's most ambitious product yet, a revolutionary data storage solution that could change everything for mid-tier tech companies. I'd conducted market research across 14 different industries, personally interviewing over 200 potential customers from manufacturing firms in Ohio to creative agencies in Portland. I'd built stakeholder relationships that spanned from venture capital firms to trade publications, coordinated with engineering teams across 3 continents, managing time zones from Singapore to Stockholm. The work had consumed me completely. I'd sacrificed weekends, missed my sister's wedding rehearsal, and turned my apartment into a war room of whiteboards and post-it notes. My kitchen counter was buried under printed market analyses. My coffee table groaned under the weight of competitive intelligence reports. I'd developed an almost obsessive knowledge of our target market's pain points, companies like Meridian Manufacturing struggling with outdated storage systems, or Innovate Studios losing creative work to server crashes, or growing fintech startups hemorrhaging money on enterprise solutions they didn't need. Every data point, every customer interview, every competitive analysis had led to the same conclusion: there was a massive gap in the market that Quantum Drive could fill perfectly. Not by competing with the giants, but by creating an entirely new category of intelligent, scalable storage for companies caught between basic solutions and enterprise complexity. But apparently, I lacked energy. I see. The words came out steadier than I felt. When does this take effect? Richard's smirk widened. Immediately. Samantha will be taking over all your responsibilities. We need someone who can really command a room, you know? Someone with presence. The room went silent except for the persistent hum of those damn lights. I could feel the eyes of the other team members on me, some sympathetic, others carefully neutral. This wasn't just a reassignment. This was a public execution disguised as a personnel decision. I took a deep breath. Understood. I'll transition my materials to Samantha today. Walking out of that conference room felt like walking through quicksand. Every step required tremendous effort, but I kept my head high. I wouldn't give Richard the satisfaction of seeing me break. Not here. Not in front of everyone. But let me take you back 6 months earlier, when everything still felt possible. Zeus Technologies had hired me as their senior product marketing manager with great fanfare. I was their fresh perspective, their innovative thinker, their answer to breaking into new market segments. The recruitment process had been intense, 5 rounds of interviews, including a 4-hour strategic planning session where I'd been asked to analyze Zeus's entire product portfolio and identify growth opportunities. Richard himself had recruited me from Nexus Corp, where I'd successfully launched 3 B2B products in 2 years. My previous company had been smaller, scrappier, but I'd proven I could build marketing strategies that actually drove revenue. My track record spoke for itself: a 340% increase in qualified leads for their cloud security platform, a complete market repositioning that turned their struggling analytics tool into a category leader, and partnerships with industry influencers that had generated over $50 million in earned media value. We need someone who can think outside the box, Richard had said during my final interview, leaning forward across the polished conference table. Someone who can challenge our assumptions and push us forward. Your work at Nexus shows exactly that kind of strategic thinking. The offer had been generous, 30% more than my Nexus salary, plus equity, plus the promise of building my own team within the first year. More importantly, it had been the chance to work with cutting-edge technology at a company with serious funding and ambitious goals. I believed him. God help me, I actually believed him. The Quantum Drive project landed on my desk 3 weeks into my tenure. It was Zeus's moonshot, a data storage solution so advanced it could revolutionize how companies manage their digital infrastructure. The technology was solid, developed by our brilliant engineering team led by Dr. Monica Vance. But technology means nothing without proper positioning, messaging, and market penetration. That's where I came in. I dove into the project with everything I had. The first month was pure research immersion. I interviewed 43 potential customers across different industries, spending hours on video calls with IT directors at companies like Coastal Logistics, whose current storage system crashed twice monthly, and Brightworth Consulting, whose data backup took 16 hours and often failed completely. I analyzed competitor weaknesses by studying their customer complaint forums, pricing models, and support documentation. I identified untapped market segments by cross-referencing industry growth data with technology adoption patterns. The breakthrough came during a conversation with the CTO of a Portland-based architecture firm. "We need something that grows with us," she'd said, exhaustion evident in her voice. "Right now, we're either stuck with systems that can't handle our file sizes, or we're paying enterprise prices for features we don't even understand. There's nothing in between." That conversation crystallized everything I'd been seeing in the data. Mid-tier companies were desperately seeking cost-effective alternatives to enterprise-level storage solutions. They needed something sophisticated enough for their growing data needs: massive CAD files, high-resolution video content, extensive client databases, but accessible enough for their limited IT budgets and small technical teams. The market research took 3 months to complete properly. I built detailed buyer personas, mapped customer journey touchpoints, calculated total addressable market size by segment. I discovered that this in-between market represented approximately $2.7 billion in annual spending across North America alone, with growth projected at 12% annually through 2028. Quantum Drive was perfect for them. I built a comprehensive launch strategy around this insight. Instead of competing directly with established enterprise players like Storage Tech Corp or Data Vault Systems, we'd create an entirely new category. We'd position Quantum Drive as the intelligent choice for growing businesses, sophisticated technology without the enterprise complexity or price point. The strategy was multi-layered. For messaging, I developed 3 core value propositions: intelligent scalability that adapted to actual usage patterns rather than requiring upfront capacity planning, transparent pricing with no hidden enterprise fees, and implementation that required days rather than months. For channels, I identified industry-specific trade publications, regional business journals, and technology conferences focused on growing companies rather than Fortune 500 enterprises. I mapped out a 12-month rollout plan that included thought leadership articles in publications like Mid-Market Technology Review, speaking engagements at regional business growth conferences, and strategic partnerships with business consultants who worked primarily with expanding companies. The budget allocation emphasized relationship building over mass advertising, recognizing that our target market made technology decisions based on peer recommendations and detailed evaluation rather than brand recognition. The presentation went beautifully. I'd spent 2 weeks preparing, building a 60-slide deck that walked through market analysis, competitive positioning, customer personas, channel strategy, and projected ROI. Richard nodded enthusiastically throughout, particularly during the slides showing how our positioning avoided direct competition with established players while targeting a high-growth market segment. Dr. Vance praised my market analysis, specifically the technical requirements mapping that showed how Quantum Drive's features aligned perfectly with mid-market needs. The executive team approved the strategy unanimously, with CFO Catherine Walsh calling it the most thorough market entry strategy she'd seen in her 12 years at Zeus. "This is exactly the kind of thinking we hired you for, Alicia," Richard said after the meeting, as executives filed out discussing implementation timelines. "You found our sweet spot. This could be bigger than anything we've launched before." The following weeks felt like validation of everything I'd worked toward. Budget approvals came through faster than expected. The engineering team scheduled additional features that aligned with my customer research findings. Industry analysts agreed to briefing calls to discuss the market gap we were addressing. 3 major trade publications expressed interest in exclusive launch coverage. For the first time since joining Zeus, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. I should have been suspicious when things went too smoothly. The first warning sign came 3 months later during a routine check-in meeting. I was updating Richard on our progress, media relationships established with 12 key industry publications, industry influencers engaged including 3 prominent business growth consultants who had agreed to evaluate early versions of Quantum Drive, launch event venue secured at the Portland Convention Center with accommodations for 350 attendees focused on growing Pacific Northwest businesses. The momentum had been building beautifully. Our pre-launch content strategy was generating engagement rates 30% higher than industry averages. Early customer interviews were exceeding expectations. Prototype testing with 6 companies had resulted in unanimous positive feedback and provisional purchase agreements pending general availability. 3 venture capital firms had reached out expressing interest in companies using our technology, suggesting potential client pipeline growth beyond our initial projections. I was mid-sentence, explaining how our partnership with Northwest Business Growth Alliance would provide direct access to over 400 member companies in our target demographic, when Richard interrupted me. Alicia, I need to ask you something directly. Do you think you have enough gravitas for this launch? The word hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Gravitas. Another loaded word that seemed to carry meanings I wasn't supposed to understand but somehow was expected to address. I'm not sure I understand the question, I replied carefully. I mean, this is our biggest product launch in 5 years. We need someone who can really own the room when we present to major clients. Someone who commands respect. There it was. The subtle erosion beginning. Not my strategy. Not my work quality. My presence. My ability to command respect. Richard, my strategy has exceeded every milestone we've set. Client feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Pre-launch buzz is building exactly as projected. I'm not questioning your work, Alicia. I'm questioning whether you're the right person to be the face of this campaign. The face of this campaign. My campaign. The strategy I'd built from scratch, the relationships I'd cultivated, the vision I'd crafted, apparently, I wasn't qualified to represent my own work. What specific concerns do you have? I pressed. Nothing specific. Just energy levels. Executive presence. You know what I mean. I didn't know what he meant. Or rather, I knew exactly what he meant, and it had nothing to do with my professional capabilities. But I wasn't ready to fight that battle. Not yet. I hear your concerns, I said. What would you like to see differently? Maybe try speaking up more in meetings. Project more confidence. Really own your expertise. The irony was suffocating. He wanted me to project more confidence while simultaneously undermining the very foundation of that confidence, my authority over my own project. I tried to adapt, though every change felt like putting on clothing that didn't fit properly. I spoke louder in meetings, my natural conversational tone replaced by something more forceful that felt performative and hollow. I used more assertive language, turning collaborative phrases like "I think we should consider" into demands like "we need to implement immediately." I scheduled one-on-ones with key executives to demonstrate my expertise, preparing detailed briefings on market dynamics and competitive analysis that I presented with the kind of aggressive confidence that seemed to resonate in Zeus's corporate culture. The wardrobe changes were the most galling. I spent nearly $2,000 on sharper blazers and more structured pieces that might convey the gravitas Richard seemed to think I lacked. Designer suits in charcoal and navy. Heels that added 3 inches to my height but made walking across Zeus's polished concrete floors sound like artillery fire. Statement jewelry that caught light and drew attention in meetings where I was trying to discuss quarterly growth projections and customer acquisition costs. I even hired an executive coach, Rebecca Stone, who specialized in executive presence development and charged $300 per hour to teach me how to command rooms and project authority. She filmed me giving presentations, analyzed my body language, critiqued my vocal patterns. You need to take up more physical space, she advised. Spread your materials wider on conference tables. Use broader gestures. Make people aware of your presence before you even speak. The coaching felt like learning to perform a character in a play I didn't audition for and didn't want to be in. None of it mattered. 2 weeks before the official announcement that would strip me of my role, I overheard a conversation that explained everything. I was working late, reviewing final preparations for the launch sequence, confirming speaker arrangements for the Portland event, coordinating media interview schedules, finalizing demonstration scripts that would showcase Quantum Drive's capabilities for our target audience. The office was mostly empty, just the cleaning crew and a few other dedicated workaholics like myself scattered across the floor. I was printing presentation materials in the copy room adjacent to Richard's office when I heard voices through the wall. The conversation had clearly been ongoing for some time, but what I caught stopped me dead. Samantha has that executive presence we need, Richard was saying, his voice carrying clearly through the thin wall. She's got the polish, the confidence. When she walks into a room, clients sit up and pay attention. She commands respect immediately. But Alicia built this entire strategy from the ground up, came another voice, Dr. Vance, advocating for me even when I wasn't there to defend myself. She understands every nuance of the market positioning, every detail of customer psychology, every aspect of competitive differentiation. Bringing in someone new this late could be disastrous for continuity and execution quality. Samantha will learn the details fast enough. She's sharp, and she has an MBA from Wharton. But she already has the presence we need for this level of launch. That's harder to teach than product knowledge. The copying machine finished its job, but I remained frozen, my laptop bag clutched against my chest, papers scattered on the counter. Samantha will learn the details. But she already has the presence. That's harder to teach than product knowledge. Presence. Energy. Gravitas. All euphemisms for the same underlying bias. I stood in the hallway, my laptop bag clutched against my chest, finally understanding the game I'd been losing without even realizing I was playing it. This wasn't about my performance. It wasn't about my strategy or my results or my dedication. This was about who they thought looked the part. The day of my demotion, because let's call it what it was, I made a decision. As I cleared out my project files and prepared to hand over 6 months of my life to someone else, I realized something crucial. I might not be able to control Richard's biases, but I could control how I responded to them. I wasn't going to disappear quietly. That afternoon, I reached out to Dr. Vance through our encrypted messaging system, a precaution that seemed ridiculous until I realized I was essentially planning corporate espionage. Monica, I need your help with something. Can we meet off-site? We met at Grind Coffee, a small independent place downtown that was far enough from the Zeus office to ensure privacy but casual enough not to seem suspicious if anyone spotted us. Monica arrived 10 minutes after me, ordering a double espresso and settling into the corner booth where I'd been nursing a latte and rehearsing my pitch. "This is wrong, Alicia," she said before I could even start explaining, her voice carrying the frustration I'd been suppressing for weeks. "Your strategy is brilliant. It's based on actual market research and customer needs, not wishful thinking about brand perception. Pulling you off the launch now is corporate suicide." "I know. And I think there's a way to prove it, but I need your help." I laid out my plan methodically, the same way I'd approached the original market research. It was risky, potentially career-ending if discovered, but I was already watching my career burn anyway. At least this way, I could control the fire and maybe save the project I'd invested 6 months of my life in creating. "You want me to do what exactly?" Monica's eyes widened as I explained the scope of what I was proposing. "I want you to let me continue working on the launch. Unofficially. Behind the scenes. Keep me informed about Samantha's decisions, the changes she makes to my strategy, the feedback from engineering and early client interactions. When things start going wrong, and they will go wrong, I'll be ready with solutions and course corrections." Monica set down her espresso cup with deliberate precision, considering the implications. "I want you to let me continue working on the launch. Unofficially. Behind the scenes. Keep me informed about Samantha's decisions, the changes she makes to my strategy. When things start going wrong, and they will, I'll be ready with solutions." "Alicia, if Richard finds out." "He won't find out unless we want him to. Look, you know the engineering side better than anyone. You know which aspects of the strategy are absolutely critical for technical integration. If Samantha starts making changes that compromise those elements, someone needs to be prepared to fix them." Monica was quiet for a long moment, stirring her coffee with mechanical precision. "You really think she'll mess it up?" "I think she'll focus on the flashy, visible elements while missing the foundational pieces. She'll want to make her mark by changing things, not by understanding why they were designed that way in the first place." "And if you're wrong? If she does a good job?" I had considered that possibility during the sleepless night after my demotion. "Then I'll have learned something valuable, and Zeus will have a successful launch." "That's not a loss." Monica agreed to help. Over the next 4 days, I watched my predictions play out with depressing accuracy. Samantha immediately began optimizing my strategy, making changes that looked impressive in PowerPoint presentations but ignored crucial market realities I'd spent months documenting and validating. Her first major change was shifting our target demographic to enterprise-level clients, the exact segment I'd deliberately avoided because it was oversaturated and dominated by established players with decades of relationships and unlimited marketing budgets. She scheduled presentations with Fortune 500 companies whose decision-making processes typically took 18 to 24 months and whose technology requirements far exceeded what Quantum Drive was designed to address. The messaging redesign was equally problematic. She transformed our accessible positioning into jargon-heavy marketing speak that emphasized technical specifications over business value. Instead of intelligent scalability for growing businesses, the new tagline became enterprise-grade data architecture optimization. Instead of focusing on cost-effectiveness and ease of implementation, her materials highlighted technical benchmarks and feature comparisons that would only matter to companies with dedicated IT departments and unlimited budgets. The venue change was perhaps the most telling. She moved the launch event from the Portland Convention Center, chosen specifically for its accessibility to Pacific Northwest growing businesses, to the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Seattle. The new venue would impress enterprise executives but was geographically inconvenient for the small and medium-sized business owners who represented our actual market opportunity. Monica sent me updates disguised as casual text conversations, each message confirming another strategic misstep. "Hey, heard about the new timeline changes. How's your week going?" translated to urgent concerns about acceleration that ignored technical realities. "The engineering team is concerned about the new timeline," Monica texted on day 2. "Samantha wants to accelerate deployment by 3 weeks, but that doesn't allow adequate time for integration testing with client systems." She's scheduled media briefings with Tier 1 tech publications, came another update. "But she's positioning us as an enterprise solution now. Those journalists are going to ask about features and scalability that we specifically chose not to emphasize." By day 4, I knew the implosion was imminent. The final straw came when Samantha decided to change our core value proposition entirely. Instead of intelligent choice for growing businesses, she pivoted to enterprise-grade power for enterprise-grade companies. It was generic, uninspired, and positioned us directly against competitors with decades of market presence and billions in marketing budgets. I spent that night preparing. Not for gloating or revenge, but for rescue. Friday morning arrived with the subtlety of a hurricane. I was in my cubicle, yes, they'd moved me to a cubicle after my demotion, when Richard's voice echoed across the office. "Alicia. Conference room. Now." The entire floor went silent. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Keyboards fell quiet. Even the perpetual hum of the coffee machine seemed to pause in anticipation. I took a deep breath and walked toward the conference room, my heels clicking against the polished concrete floor. Richard stood at the head of the table, his face flushed with anger, his hands braced against the surface like he was preparing to flip it over. "Why is the rollout a disaster?" he demanded before I'd even closed the door. "I'm sorry? Don't play dumb with me. 3 major media outlets have published pieces questioning our market positioning. 2 potential enterprise clients have pulled out after our pitch presentations. Our launch event registrations are 60% below projections. The whole thing is falling apart, and I want to know what you did to sabotage it." There it was. The accusation I'd been expecting. When things go wrong, blame the person you already pushed aside. "Richard, I haven't been involved in the launch for 4 days. Everything that's happening now is the result of decisions made after I was removed from the project." Bullshit. You had to have done something. Left out crucial information. Failed to properly transition your work. Something. I looked at him for a long moment, this man who had systematically undermined my authority and then blamed me for the consequences. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his angry face. "Would you like to know what went wrong?" I asked quietly. "I want to know what you did wrong." "I didn't do anything wrong, Richard. But I can tell you exactly what's happening and how to fix it." He stared at me, his anger warring with desperation. The launch was his responsibility, his reputation on the line. He needed solutions more than he needed someone to blame. "Fine. Talk." I moved to the whiteboard and began sketching out the market positioning matrix I developed months earlier. The core issue is market segment confusion. My original strategy positioned Quantum Drive as a solution for mid-tier companies seeking enterprise-level capabilities without enterprise-level complexity or cost. We identified a sweet spot, businesses too sophisticated for basic solutions but not large enough for full enterprise packages. Richard's scowl deepened, but he didn't interrupt. When Samantha shifted our positioning to target enterprise clients directly, she moved us into a market segment where we can't compete effectively. We don't have the brand recognition, the established relationships, or the feature depth that enterprise customers expect from their primary data storage solution. I drew arrows showing the competitive landscape, illustrating how our repositioning had placed us directly in the path of industry giants. The media coverage questioning our positioning makes sense because journalists who cover enterprise technology know this market intimately. They can immediately see that our messaging doesn't align with enterprise buyer priorities or decision-making processes. So what are you suggesting? Richard's voice had lost some of its hostility, replaced by reluctant attention. We go back to the original strategy. Immediately. We acknowledge that we're not trying to compete with enterprise solutions, we're creating a new category for growing businesses. We emphasize intelligent scalability over raw power. We focus on value and accessibility over feature completeness. And the media coverage? We turn it into an asset. We arrange exclusive interviews with mid-tier company executives who desperately need exactly what we're offering. We let them tell the story of their data storage challenges and how existing solutions are either too limited or too complex for their needs. We make the journalists see the market gap we're filling instead of the market we're trying to penetrate. Richard was quiet for several minutes, studying the diagrams I'd drawn. I could see him calculating the cost of admitting error versus the cost of continued failure. How long would it take to implement these changes? If we move quickly, we can salvage the launch. The technology hasn't changed, just the messaging around it. Dr. Vance and the engineering team can provide technical briefings that emphasize the features our actual target market cares about. We redirect media attention to the stories that matter for our positioning. We adjust the launch event to focus on our real audience instead of trying to impress people who were never going to buy from us anyway. And you think this will work? I looked him directly in the eyes. I know it will work. Because it was working before you stopped trusting the person you hired to make it work. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. I could see him processing not just the strategic implications but the personal ones, the admission that his judgment had been wrong, that his biases had nearly destroyed a potentially successful launch. Finally, he spoke. What do you need? The next 72 hours were a controlled chaos of strategic pivoting. I worked with Monica and her engineering team to rebuild messaging that emphasized technical elegance over raw specifications. I coordinated with our media contacts to arrange new briefings focused on business value rather than feature comparisons. I reached out to mid-tier companies in my network, gathering testimonials and case studies that demonstrated real market demand for our positioning. Samantha, to her credit, stepped aside gracefully once she understood the scope of the course correction required. She admitted that she'd been trying to make her mark on the strategy without fully grasping the market research that had informed my original approach. I thought I could improve on your work, she told me during a brief conversation in the break room. I realize now that I was trying to fix something that wasn't broken. The launch event, when it finally happened, exceeded our original projections. Media coverage was positive and focused. Client response was enthusiastic. 3 companies signed preliminary agreements before the presentations had even concluded. But the real victory wasn't in the metrics. 2 weeks after the successful launch, Richard called me into his office. The same office where I'd been demoted, where he'd questioned my energy and gravitas and presence. Alicia, I owe you an apology. I waited. I made assumptions about what this launch needed, and I was wrong. Your strategy was sound. More than sound, it was exactly what we needed. Thank you. I want to offer you the Director of Product Marketing position. It comes with a significant raise, expanded team, and authority over all major product launches going forward. It was more than I'd ever expected when I'd started this job. It was vindication, recognition, advancement, everything I should have wanted. But something had changed during those 4 days of watching my work be dismantled and then fighting to save it. I'd discovered something about myself that I hadn't known before. I'd found a kind of energy that Richard had never recognized, a presence that didn't depend on his approval or his validation. I appreciate the offer, Richard. I really do. But I've decided to start my own consulting firm. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, disappointment, calculation. Your own firm? I've realized that there are a lot of companies out there struggling with exactly the kinds of challenges Zeus faced with this launch. They have good products and smart people, but they're missing the strategic positioning that could make the difference between mediocrity and success. Alicia, be practical. Starting your own business is risky. You'd be giving up a secure position, benefits, a proven track record here. You're right. It is risky. But I've learned something important about myself recently. I work better when I'm trusted to do the work I was hired to do. He was quiet for a moment. If you change your mind. I won't. But thank you. 6 months later, my consulting firm has 3 clients and is growing steadily. Dr. Vance left Zeus to join me as a technical partner, bringing her deep engineering expertise to complement my market strategy work. We're building something different, a firm that combines technical depth with strategic positioning, that values substance over presentation, that measures success in client results rather than executive impressions.